Hello and welcome, everyone. I am super excited that you decided to join us today. And we will talk about pet health today, which includes supplements, it includes food, and it also includes grooming products. And as you all know, pet health is booming. There are new supplements and grooming products and new food products launching daily. And pet parents also have high expectations when it comes to the products their pets are using, not only in terms of safety, but also in terms of efficacy. And we also see that more and more pet products are running clinical trials, which is amazing. And it's very similar to what we are seeing in terms of their human counterparts as well. But unfortunately, the pet health industry is about 7 to 10 years behind compared to the human health and wellness industry. And today we're going to hear about different study designs to test the efficacy of pet products. We also hear about something like sample sizes, for example, inclusion exclusion criteria. We hear about including telehealth in these studies and also what to do with study results. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Suzanne Mitschke. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Citrus Labs, and Citrus Labs is the leading provider of clinical trials for brands. We work with supplements, superfoods, cosmetics, and obviously also pet health products. And the end product of a clinical trial is typically a substantiated product claim. And if you're interested in conducting your own research, you can contact us at hello@citruslabs.com and can visit us at www.citruslabs.com. Now, before we start, some housekeeping. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box in Zoom, and we will answer your questions at the end of this webinar. And today I am joined by two of our wonderful research team members, Dr. Kathy Lewis and Dr. Davide Stefanuti. Both are veterinarians and are conducting studies with Citrus Labs. And Kathy, Davide, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today and telling us a little bit more about clinical trials for pet products. And as a first step, could you very briefly introduce yourselves, starting with Davide?
Thank you, Suzanne. Hello, everybody. I'm Davide. I'm a veterinarian. I went to vet school in Italy, and after that, I did a PhD in veterinary science. For the first half of my PhD, I focus on studying functional foods, pet supplements, running trials, both perception studies and clinical trials in dogs and cats. And during the second part of my PhD, I moved abroad, first to the US, to Tufts University, and then to a startup in London to investigate the application of cultivated meat in pet nutrition as an alternative protein. I'm a resident at the European College of Veterinary and Comparative Nutrition, and I work as a veterinary consultant for both companies and pet owners, and stimulate pet health at Citrus Lab to run pet supplement, pet food, and pet health products in general trials to make sure that the products that are out there are working and to help companies promoting effective product.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Davide. Thank you for being here. And Kathy.
My name is Kathy Lewis. Hello, everyone. I am a small animal veterinarian that is practicing right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. I graduated from vet school a long time ago, 2002, and I've been in clinical practice ever since graduation. You can see from my picture, at one time I was practicing on pigs and I did some horse work. Now I'm primarily focused on dogs and cats. My main interests are behavior, senior geriatric care, internal medicine, pain management, fear-free vet care. And I have 2 rescue dogs. One's named Randolph, one is Clementine, who I hope will not bark during this webinar. I can't guarantee that. And then I have 2 human children. I have twin boys. Both are in college.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kathy. And obviously, supplements and also grooming products are getting more and more important for pet owners, and the industry is really booming, and pet parents want to optimize the health of their pets as well. And Kathy, as
Mhm.
a vet, how do you see supplements, being incorporated in the regimen of pets? And also, do you see in your practice that supplements are more and more important now?
I definitely, over the past 20 years, have seen the use of supplements increasing greatly, especially after COVID. I think a lot of people in general are turning to more natural, holistic approaches to healthcare for themselves, and it's also going over to pet care. I think there's a little bit of a distrust of the pharmaceutical companies. People are looking more towards supplements. They want a more natural treatment for their pets. So I think that's a big part of it. Talking about, you said the business is booming. I would agree that the supplement business is booming. I think there are a few factors that are contributing to that. The primary one, I think we all know, is that there's just a major increase in pet ownership. I think in 2024, I think they said 66% of US households have a pet. So that in and of itself means there's a much larger customer base for selling supplements. I think the other thing that I'm noticing over time, there's much more humanization of pets, and they're increasingly being viewed as members of their family, of the family. So it's leading people to seek products that promote health similar to the way they would do for themselves. There's also a real focus now. What we are trying to promote is preventive healthcare for pets. And so we want to encourage pet owners to start supplements early, support health, try to prevent future problems and the need for medications down the line. The other thing that during the past few years, there's just so many more supplements available targeting a variety of different health issues, joint health, digestion, skin, even cognitive function, which I utilize all of those in my patients. The other couple of things, of course, the online retail growth has promoted supplement use. People are able to get online, research supplements. They come in to me asking questions and asking for my recommendations. And then the last thing that I think we have to focus on is the aging pet population. I mean, pets are living a lot longer due to better nutrition, better care. And so that demographic shift is definitely contributing to the growth of the pet supplement market, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely right with the humanization of pets. And I'm in Los Angeles, and especially in Santa Monica, where the office is. I think 75% of households have a pet, and particularly dogs. They are dogs everywhere, and it's really interesting to see. And many pet owners who buy health and wellness products for their animals are also using, for example, supplements for themselves. And Davide, do you see that the expectations of pet owners changed in terms of supplements? For example, are they looking for more science-backed products now?
Absolutely. There are two main factors that influence decision making in this world. When a pet owner wants to know what product to use, if it's effective or no, they do two things. They inevitably do internet searches and they ask their vets. And while internet searches, there's everything on the web, and so there's also a lot of misinformation. But the good side of it is that you can also find the proper information, and that is based on evidence. On the other side, when you go to the vet necessarily, is going to give you an answer that is based on evidence. And therefore, it's essential for companies to collect this evidence, because at the end of the day, you need a product that works. If the product does not work, you're not really in the pet health space. You are in the deceiving consumer space, and that will never work long term. But if you instead have a product that works, if you have the proof that it works because you run a trial or more than one trial, then it can give you a competitive advantage, since you have that to back you, and you can use that in your marketing. While if your product works, but you didn't collect the evidence, then it's all based, on anecdotal evidence, which is not as strong. You cannot make the claims that you could make once instead you have collected the evidence. And so at the end of the day, there is a massive advantage for companies to have this demonstration that their products are effective, because then veterinarians are going to happily recommend them, because the vets, they do a great figures when they recommend the product and it works. It's great. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the pet, for the owner, for the veterinarians, for the company. And also, when pet owners go and do the research by themselves online, the more and more they're understanding the same way that they are understanding for their own supplements, their own products, what is a product that is based on evidence and that can actually work, and what is something that instead does not have any kind of scientifically support behind it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think it's a trend that started in human health and is now also going into pet health. But I quickly wanted to also touch on different study designs before we go a little bit into the nitty and gritty of clinical studies, also for pets. And I think it's important for brands. It's important for brands to know that there are different options that all come with like different pros and cons. And one study design that you probably heard before is the so-called gold standard of clinical trials, a randomized controlled trial, or RCT. For example, a double-blind placebo-controlled study is part of an RCT. And a study like this involves the actual intervention, the test product, and that can be, obviously tested against a placebo or a competing product, for example, or both. That's the beauty with these RCTs. And typically neither the study participant nor the researcher actually knows which product is the actual intervention and which one is the placebo or the competing product. And this study design typically involves questionnaires, typically involves telehealth visits, and can also involve something like stool markers, for example, or before and after photos or videos, and can also track, weight changes or activity levels through, trackers or smart scales, for example. Another study design that also falls under the RCT family is a so-called crossover study, in which you have only one study group, but this group is their own placebo or their own control group. So the same group will take the actual product and will take the placebo or will go through control phase, for example, or can also use a competitor product. And then additionally, we also have true single group studies. They are often referred to as pilot studies. Here you have one study group and there's no control group or no placebo group. And you have repeat measurements and compare baseline to end line to see if there was an effect. And you can use the same methodologies for these studies as well, like questionnaires, telehealth visits, include trackers, photos, videos. And then you also have something called perception studies. They can also be referred to as marketing studies. And this is a study type that is less scientific, but they're a good way to create claims that are backed by data, not really by science, but by data. And it's important to know that, it's not a clinical trial. And here we only ask for the owner's perception, for example, how they perceive behavior change. And a study like this doesn't include telehealth assessments or trackers or stool samples, but it can include before and after photos and videos, but these won't get graded by our vets. And if you decide to work with Citrus Labs, we can customize every study to your specific goals, to your specific needs, and also budget. And we don't follow a one-size-fits-all approach. And we can conduct all of these study types and, from very complex multi-arm randomized controlled trials to crossover studies, to single group studies, to also perception studies. All right. Now, Davide, you have a lot of experience with research, and we talk often about the issues that more traditional studies have challenges when it comes to designing studies for these pet health products, and I think a couple of these challenges stem from sample sizes, for example, right, or study duration, for example. And how do you address issues like a questionable sample size or questionable study duration?
Absolutely. Sample size historically has been a huge issue in veterinary research, mainly for three reasons. The first reason was a lack of resources. Of course, conducting a study can require some financial resources that until 20 years ago were not really there. But now that's not an issue anymore because of how big this market is becoming. So that is a problem of the past. The second historical issue why many veterinary studies did not reach a sample size that was big enough was how hard can be the recruitment process. Because based on what type of animals you want to include in the study, for veterinary researchers can be really hard to being able to put together that sample in a limited amount of time. And there are many studies that never finished because they were not able to recruit enough animals. And that's where a company like Citrus Labs can achieve, can provide incredible amount of value to companies who want to run this kind of trials, because they are resolving the recruitment issue, which is a big pain point when you are planning these studies, because you need to reach enough dogs or cats or horses to reach that sample size, and it's not easy. And having a company that is able to do that for you, it's amazing. And the third issue was the fact that in veterinary studies until a few years ago, the same level of rigor of statistical understanding of the subject wasn't there as it was in the human medicine, because as you said before, veterinary medicine is always a few years behind. But now on that side, it's definitely there. So now when you want to publish a study, Definitely, sample size is always one of the things that reviewers are going to control, because what matters is that you are able to infer from your sample, to infer that that product also works in the general population. And to do that, you need to have some basic understanding of the statistics that are based on the outcome of the study. So there is not like a one-fits-all solution that you can say, okay, a study with 100 subjects is enough for everything. No, it depends on what you are testing and on what are the outcomes of the study. Based on that, there are some statistical methods that are defined. There are also guidelines out there that define what methods, what statistical methods you should use. And so somebody was an expert in this, whether a veterinarian or a biostatistician, they should conduct this part to make sure that the sample size is enough. Because otherwise, you are maybe plan and run the best study, but if you do not have a sample size that is significant, then you cannot infer on the general population the efficacy of that product. And so it's absolutely important to run and to consider the statistical aspect. The same is true for study duration. It needs to be something that is tailored on the specific of the study, on the product that you're testing and on the outcomes, because based on that, some studies could be very brief, some could be very long. It needs a high level of customization based on the specific of the studies.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think we should also very briefly touch on inclusion, exclusion criteria. Davide, we talked about this a couple of times, right? These criteria can make or break a study. And, what do you think, or can you talk us through, how to decide on choosing the best inclusion, exclusion criteria for a study?
Absolutely. It's absolutely correct to say that these are what can make or break a study. I love that old quote about from Abraham Lincoln that he goes, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." And that is the axe is what inclusion and exclusion criteria are for trials. Because once again, if you forget to properly take care of this part, you could run a study that does not allow you to make any kind of conclusion, of significant conclusion. Why? Because trials are there to assess an association of causality. So if I use this product, this is the effect. And to make sure that there is a cause-effect relationship and not just an association, you need to control the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So you need to go and test this product on the correct population. So the population that, for example, if you're testing a product for osteoarthritis, of course, the first inclusion criteria is that for dogs to have osteoarthritis. But inclusion criteria are the easiest part to figure it out, of course. The hardest part is exclusion criteria, and you need to think about everything in this, because if you include animals that bring in a confounding factor, and there are many confounding factors, from sex to age, of course, because of the differences between a puppy and a old dog, for example, breeds, if they're neutered or no, all kinds of pathologies and clinical conditions. All of this could influence the study, because this is the product that you're testing, this is the outcome, and you want to prove that there is a cause-effect relationship here. There could be confounding factors that are either making you think that there is an association where there is not, or they could make you miss the association. Because maybe there are some genetic difference for in certain breeds that overshadow, that make the outcome that you are checking, they modify it somehow. So you need to consider all of this. It's what really makes or breaks a study. Exclusion and inclusion criteria are basically what allows you to control all the confounding factors. And then if you get this right, then you can prove that association, so the fact that the product is working, with a lot of confidence that otherwise you could.
Absolutely. And when we talk about study design, there's also one thing that we shouldn't forget, which is methodologies. And one obvious choice of this is telehealth. And Kathy, you have lots of experience with telehealth. And why do you think is this a good method to also include in studies, in clinical studies for pets?
Well, I think the primary one would be the increased accessibility, making it so telehealth just removes the geographical barriers so that you can have expand your pool of potential participants, increase your sample size, as you all were discussing. I think there's definitely the aspect of reduced costs and time involved. If you eliminate the need for travel, in-person visits, that decreases the cost to both the participant and the researcher, which is helpful. I think a big one, improved participant experience, especially for pets that get stressed going to the vet office. As a result, the owners are stressed. And so this can reduce the anxiety, allow the animals to stay in their familiar environments during the consultations. I think it, once again, allows for better recruitment, and definitely the convenience of telehealth in the situation of being in a study will probably make it more likely that they'll continue to participate. You'll retain them in the study.
Yeah, I think retention is and adherence as well is a very big issue, specifically for site-based studies where you have like lots of dropouts because it's just not convenient to go somewhere. Versus if you can do it online, right? It's much better. And Kathy, would you also say that because then animals are less stressed, especially when you are looking at something like a supplement for to calm an animal or for anxiety, it's probably also better to keep them at home and not in a stressful environment, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I see that also in evaluating things like if we're looking at joint supplement or something for lameness. A lot of times somebody will bring their animal in for limping, and because the animal is so stressed and there's so much adrenaline that they get there and they will not exhibit any clinical signs. The owner's frustrated and they say, I swear he was limping at home. And as soon as the dog gets home, they're limping again. So I can't, and also some animals I can't even assess at the clinic without heavy sedation or full sedation. So I can't really evaluate any clinical signs in that case. So
that's very interesting. And speaking of, for example, your kind of example with the limping is very interesting, because we do studies a lot with like hip supplements, joint supplements. And Davide, when a pet brand wants to validate their claims, what other options do they have in terms of methodologies apart from telehealth?
Absolutely. So when you want to prove the efficacy of any product, what you need is, a parameter that is standardized, that you can say, okay, this changed, this improved because you use that product. And you have basically two types of parameters: the one that are measured by humans and the one that are measured by any kind of machine. And they need to be standardized. So among the human reported outcomes, you have two humans that can do this, either the owner, and then you have the owner reported outcomes, or you have the veterinarians. For example, when we're talking about owners, what we are using is validated surveys. So surveys that have been validated by with a statistical approach to make sure that when any owner does that survey and a change between time 0 and 6 weeks later or 12 weeks later is happened, you can say, okay, this is actually true. Like the fact that this change, this is a proof, this is a demonstration that something changed because this approach was validated statistically. And for example, in the case of osteoarthritis, we have a lot of amazing tools that are validated, that owners, they do these surveys, and we know that among, in different time points, if change happens, that is demonstration of the product working. And so we have, for example, in the specific example of osteoarthritis, we have the Canine Brief Pain Inventory, which is an amazing tool to assess pain, or the Helsinki Chronic Pain Index, the Canine Orthopedic Index. And all of these tools are validated, are in the literature, and we know they are trustworthy. Among the veterinarian reported outcomes, it's pretty much the same. It's just different. It's a little bit more specific because these tools were validated among veterinarians. But it's pretty much the same. In the case of osteoarthritis, for example, you have the visual analog scale for evaluating mobility, or you have orthopedic scores to assess lameness. Among then the parameters that instead are assessed by machines, of course, you have the traditional one, like blood work, for example. But now, of course, blood work requires the animal to go to the veterinarians, the veterinary clinic. Other parameters that use biological samples do not require that. For example, fecal samples that can be collected by the owners. But now it's very interesting. We are starting to use smart technologies, for example, smart collars that are able to monitor temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, behavioral patterns, exercise levels, and this allows you to bring in a lot of data that are standardized and can allow you to detect a change between the placebo and the treatment group between different time points.
That's amazing. Yeah, smart stuff like smart colors, right? That's really cool. But also going back to telehealth as well. Kathy, sticking with the example of hip and joint supplements, specifically for dogs, how do you evaluate a dog virtually?
Well, when I've done it in the past, I would do it through video calls. I mean, I can observe a dog's behavior, the posture, observe their gait, have the owner walk them through different things like going up and down stairs. I've actually talked owners through kind of a general exam on how to do passive range of motion of joints, palpating areas to see if there's any reactions and if that's getting better on a supplement. There are other things that, I mean, it is going to be like Davide was saying, owner observation is going to play a part because you're going to be asking them to tell us how the pet's doing as far as sleeping. Is the dog sleeping better? Is the appetite better? And those kind of things. That's how I've assessed joint supplements, pain medicines, and things like that in the past through telehealth.
That's great. Yeah. I think also, probably with trackers, once we see that more and more, and once it becomes like more of a standard thing, I think like the data from trackers can probably also be included in these assessments as well. And I also want to briefly talk about how brands can leverage their results. And obviously, a brand can create product claims, which they typically display on their product page. And then brands should also create a science page on their website to tell customers more details about their study. For example, study design, methodologies, number of participants, and brands can also get, press, PR, from their study as well. And then there's also this one thing that Davide touched on very briefly already, which is publishing. And Davide, can you tell us a little bit more, what is actually involved when brands want to publish their results in a journal? And maybe you can walk us through the process as well. For example, how to choose the right journal in the first place, what's the process, and also how long does it typically take?
So I believe that publishing in peer-reviewed scientific journals it's a great thing to do for brands, because that's how you inform veterinarians at the end of the day. And so that's how veterinarians will actually um, feeling confident in recommending your product, because you have that evidence there. Of course, it's very important to choose where to publish, because unfortunately there are also journals that are predatory, and they publish a little bit of everything. So they do also publish studies that are not good, which is great for the journals, because those journals, they make you pay to publish. Inevitably, that's the business model. So you publish the study, but then what happens? That journal, the community, the scientific community, they know it's not a good journal. So they will not trust a study that is published in the journal. They will not even read it sometimes. So it's very important to go and publish in the right journals. How do you do that? There are ranking of journals. For example, one of the most common use is the Shimago one, the Shimago journal ranking, that ranks all the journals in the different categories in 4 quartiles. And the journals that are in the first quartiles are the one that, the better one, and the one that professionals trust. And for the veterinary space, you have 2 main categories of journals where veterinary research is published, which are the specific veterinary ones, and the multidisciplinary ones, like scientific reports or PLOS ONE. Among the veterinary ones, they are great especially for, depending on your product, you have journals that specify that are specialized in nutrition rather than dermatology, rather than parasitology, and so on, for all the specialties. And so going and choose the best journal for that specific field of veterinary medicine allows you to reach the professionals that then will be informed, will know that that product works, and then they can recommend it. As for the procedures, of course, first of all, you have to choose the journal, then submit the article. The article will then go through a peer review. So it will be checked, it will be controlled by scientists to make sure that it was a properly conducted trial and that the results are valid. Once this check is completed, maybe you could have, in some case, revisions, so you have to change something. But when the paper is accepted, then it's going to be published. It can take a while. It depends based on if you will or will not get revisions, and it can change also based on the journal. But overall, it can be anything between 2 to 3 months up to more than a year, depending on these factors.
Yeah. That's great. I think, it's always a wild card when it comes to how long it will take.
Yes,
Unfortunately.
it is.
Yeah.
Let me just add one thing. There is the difference between open access journals and journals that are not open access. which means open access journals, everybody can access to those papers. While if a journal is not open access, you need to pay as a consumer to access the papers. The difference is that for open access journals, you pay to publish, but then the paper can be seen, it can be read by everybody. And I personally, I think publishing in open access journals is better, especially for brands, because then everybody, literally, even your customer, not necessarily, somebody in a university or some veterinarians who pay for a subscription to the journal can access that. Everybody can access. So it's much easier to get the information out there.
Yeah, I agree. Open access is definitely the way to go. And before we go into the Q&A part, Kathy, do you have any advice for pet brands that want to conduct their own research?
Well, from my standpoint as a veterinarian, and what clients I think find most important is they definitely want to know that the supplement is safe for their pet. They want to make sure that, it's been studied for signs of potential side effects, drug interactions, making sure appropriate dosage levels. And of course, for me, if you're going to do research, of course, making sure that you adhere to ethical standards regarding treatment of animals and that kind of thing. And then just having scientific data to back up that it does in fact do what it says. That would be my recommendation.
Would you add anything to that, Davide?
I completely agree. I completely agree with everything. Absolutely on the idea of testing the products in an ethical way. That also makes a huge difference in what owners then decide, because they do want to know that the product was tested with animals rather than on animals, and the animals were treated in not good ways. That is changing also thanks to for example, what Citrus Labs is doing, and that in my opinion is great, not just for the animals, but also for the success of the product, because owners do want that ethical safety. And yes, I will just conclude to say that methodology is essential, like absolutely, like everything, exclusion, inclusion criteria, sample size, all of that. That is what makes or breaks the study. If you properly plan the study, then it's going to be much easier to conduct it and to have great results. And then, of course, having the results is the first part. The second part is being able to properly communicate those results out there to owners and veterinarians. And that's why, from scientific journals to website and social media, that's also very important. So you can get out there with something that is evidence-based, and you have the confidence of that.
Perfect. And I think now we can go over to let our audience ask a couple of questions. And while you type in your questions, I quickly wanted to let you know about our next webinar on May 16 at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, where we talk about AI for brands and how to showcase your results with smart email campaigns. And I'm joined by Rohan Seth, the founder and CEO of Ripple AI, for this webinar. And you can just scan here and register. And also, if you're interested in conducting your own clinical studies, you can reach us at either hello@citruslabs.com, or you can go on our website at www.citruslabs.com and fill out a contact form there. And now I think it's time to answer some questions. I think one of these questions was if this will be distributed. Yes, we recorded, and it will be distributed after as well. And one question is if one of you could talk about the difference in supplements for dogs and cats. Who wants to take this question? Kathy,
I
maybe
can.
you want, or Davide?
I just want
Perfect. Yeah.
to put out the first thing, palatability. Palatability is very different, can be very different between dogs and cats. So when you're planning a supplement, I mean, again, it's great. You have to do everything. You have to make sure it works. Perfect.
Mhm.
You run the trials. You do the scientific communication. Everything is great. But then the number one factor that influence the fact that the owners are going to buying the supplement again is palatability. Because if the dogs or the cats do not eat it, sometimes it happens with drugs, and it already diminished the likely of the owners to actually subminister the drugs in the proper way. But with drugs, it's since they are drugs, and they tend to try to follow the protocol a little bit more. With supplements, if their palatability is not there, it's going to be a little harder for owners to actually buy the product again, and going through a very hard fight with your animals to make them hit the product. So making sure that palatability is there is essential, and cats have much more problems with that than dogs. Many dogs eat everything, many cats do not, and so absolutely consider palatability in cat studies, making sure that cats like this product,
Yeah. And Kathy,
especially
I
when we are
think
talking
you,
about tablets.
Yeah,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I would echo what Davide said, but also formulations. Cats tend to, in most cases, do a little bit better with liquid formulations. Owners prefer liquids over treats and things like that. The other thing is you have to be careful. Some ingredients dogs are sensitive to, cats may not be sensitive to, vice versa. So just keeping that in mind when you're developing a supplement.
And Cassie, I think you told me once that also, for example, when we're looking at pain, right? Cats typically don't show pain very well.
Right. Cats, they tend to go into freeze mode. They just won't move. That it's very difficult to assess, especially lameness, things like that kind of pain. So that can be very difficult. Yes.
Yeah. So as you can see, as you heard, like huge difference between cats and dogs. Great. I think that these were all of the questions. If there are no more questions, then again, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, next webinar will be on May 16 with Rohan Seth of Ripple AI, and we'll talk about AI to help streamline your email campaigns. And remember, your email campaign can also